Hi everyone, it's Ileana and I have another card to share with you today. I think it turned out so beautiful and I was so happy with this card. I'm going to be using the Dove of Peace from Stampin' Up, and it is a wood mounted stamp. It doesn't come any other way but wood mounted. So what I did was, instead of putting it on the wood block, I put it on a piece of vinyl and then trimmed it out, and now it will stick to the lid of the Misty. So I am centering my sentiment and my dove on my vellum, and I'm using the thick vellum from Stampin' Up, and I'm just closing the lid to pick up the stamps, and then I just press them down a little bit so that I know that they're stuck well. And what I'm doing now is that I'm lining up the grid that's on the acetate to the grid that's on the lid, and then that way I could check to see if my wording is straight on that cling rubber. So, and I know it is because the line runs across it, and you can compare the line on the grid and the line on the words. I hope that makes sense. So I'm just placing my cardstock onto the platform, and I'm using some magnets because vellum is it just kind of curves by itself. And I'm using my Versamark to ink up my stamp because I'm going to be using gold embossing powder. I'm going to be using a generic brand of Michael's gold embossing powder, and it works pretty good, but you could substitute any kind of gold embossing powder that you have. And this one is the brand is Recollection. So I'm just going to sprinkle it onto my vellum, and then I'll tap off the excess. And any strays that I may have, I'm just going to use a dry watercolor brush to brush off any strays. You want to make sure that you get all the strays off because it is on vellum and the gold is very bright, and anything that is going to distract, um, my eye just goes to that. So I am very careful about trying to remove the excess. I did heat up my heat gun quite a bit because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to warp the vellum. Vellum tends to warp because it's so thin, but I am using the thick vellum from Stampin' Up, so that helps quite a bit. And once I'm happy with my heat embossing, I did wait for it to cool off just a little bit, and I'm just going to take my Copic markers and I'm just going to color on the back of the vellum. You want to pick colors that are darker than what you really want because the vellum tones it down quite a bit. And so I'm using RV19 Red Violet for my pink, and then my blue is BG49 Duck Blue. And for the beak of the dove, I'm going to be using YR18, and I think that's Sanguine. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I'm just going to color on the back, and you don't have to be all that neat because when you flip it over, you don't see where you've gone outside the lines. If you do mess up quite a bit, you could take your colorless blender and you can just remove the Copic marker that strayed. Now the problem that arises with vellum is, how do you get it to adhere to your paper without showing the adhesive? Well, I found an easy way to do that. What I'm doing is I'm taking a piece of foiled cardstock from Die Cuts with a View, and I went ahead and cut it out with my large rectangle die from Lawn Fawn, the one that has the stitch lines, and I'm just running my craft knife along a straight edge, and I'm just trimming it right on that stitch line. And I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm going to create a little frame. And you want to be careful that you don't try to press too hard with the craft knife. You just want to lightly run it a few times up and back and forth. That will be the easiest way, and you can feel when you've gone through the foil cardstock, you won't feel the resistance anymore, and you'll be able to feel your craft mat below. And so I'm going to do that all the way around. The other thing you can do is that if you don't have the foiled cardstock, you could just cut it out with white cardstock and then you could gold emboss it and it'll match your dove. So now that it's done, I need to figure out how to adhere this tiny little frame around the edge of my card. And I took some score tape, and this is the 1/8 size, and it was wider than the edge of the frame, so I am just putting it so that it's going to be on the outside of the stitch line on the vellum. And what I plan to do is I just fold the tape over, the adhesive portion of the tape. Once I remove the lining, I'll just go ahead and push it over so it's not overhanging. At first I tried to wrap it around, and I did that first, and then I discovered that the edge of my card was sticky, so I had to figure out a different way to attach the frame to the vellum and then the vellum to the card. And so here I've gone all the way around, and now I'm going to pull off that backing, and then what I'll do is I'll just fold it over onto itself. And so there's only adhesive on that little portion of the edge of the card. Now the other problem is to get the frame attached to the front of the vellum without it warping. And so I'm going to try it just to do it freehand because I figured I could just trace it. And then I think, well, I'll just use my MISTI. And so I put it in the corner. I put my cardstock in the corner, my vellum in the corner, I mean. And I'm sorry, I zoomed in and I forgot to zoom out. So basically I'm wedging my vellum into the corner, and then I'm just going to start with the corner of the frame, and I'm just going to jam it into the corner of the MISTI, and I know that they're perfectly lined up. And then I just guide the frame onto the edge of the vellum with my fingertips. And I know that if I push the frame against the edge of the MISTI, then I know it's on the edge of the vellum. And once I get the two sides done, I'm going to flip my cardstock around and do the same thing. And once again, I apologize for being out of frame, but it was the easiest way to get the frame perfectly lined up. I didn't want to try this with liquid adhesive because I always seem to add just a tiny bit too much, and then I have it oozing out in between, so I didn't want to do that. Even with the multi-matte, I just didn't want to do it. I thought that using the tape adhesive would be better. And so now that I've got it all lined up, I need to add more adhesive so that I could stick it to the front of my card panel. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. And you can see on the back of the card, on the back of the vellum, the big mess that's on the vellum from the Copic coloring, but when you flip it over, it looks so beautiful. It's kind of amazing because there's a big mess on the back. It's kind of like cross stitch where you have this big mess on the back, but when you flip the cross stitch over, it looks absolutely gorgeous. So I'm doing the exact same thing. I added the tape, and then now I am just folding it over. And I'm going to use the MISTI again to put it onto the front of my cardstock. Of my card base, I mean. And once I get it attached to the front of my card, the card base is a little bit bigger than what my panel is, and so I'll have to go back with my craft blade and I'll just trim off any extra card base that is overhanging. Well, I hope you find this helpful in creating an elegant card for Christmas. It's probably not one that you want to mass produce, but it's probably a good one to send to the card-worthy people in your life. Please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button, and head on over to the blog and subscribe to get your updates. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.